Hi everybody, thanks to English Electric, links in the description, I've had this Zero FXS on loan for a week to give you a few videos and a review. This is the CBT legal 11 kilowatt version, but this thing is as fast as a 400. Now I've been trying to decide how I'm going to do this review because obviously electric bikes is a huge subject of its own beyond this bike itself. And I've realised there's probably two people who are going to be watching this video, well hopefully more than two, but two types of people. People who are just interested and people who actually want to buy one. If you want to actually buy one, I would suggest watching all of the videos I've done on it. I'm going to do this review for the person who's just interested and wants to know, you know, the top trump figures and what is it really like. Okay, so let's cover those top trump figures because they're actually pretty impressive, keeping in mind that this is a CBT legal bike that a 17-year-old can ride, or anyone on a proper CBT can. This is a 125cc equivalent, not a 50cc equivalent, so it's not the same with car license and stuff where you can ride a 50cc equivalent. But anyway, this thing does about 86 miles an hour. It has 106 Newton meters of torque. Now, if that doesn't mean a lot to you, know that my DRZ 400 SM has about 39 Newton meters of torque, which means that this has twice the torque. That gives it absolutely mind-blowing acceleration. Now, this one has got the 7.2 battery in it. It's also the slow charging version. It takes 6 to 7 hours to charge this battery fully, and you can do that from a normal household socket. It basically plugs in down here with like a kettle lead. However, there are a quick charging version to this and a double-sized battery and other options and things. Obviously, if you're looking to buy one, you will look into the options that you might want to add on to it. But know that this is the most basic, and I've had great fun with it. Now, the possibly most impressive top trump figure of this bike is the price tag, and it is just under £10,000. However, that price has been falling over the years. Zero Motorcycles, the prices have been coming down and down as technology has increased, but they have also been improving the bikes themselves. So yes, no doubt, it is a very expensive bike, and that will take it out of the realms for most people. But this is early days for electric bikes. Look, when I was young, CD players were 1,500 quid, then they became 15 quid, and now no one wants one. As I say, things get cheaper over time as battery technology improves. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, this has got the half-size battery, so you may be questioning, what is the range? The claimed range that was given to me by English Electric was between 40 and 70 miles is what you can expect. Now, I've done a video trying to get as many miles out of this in a normal riding condition. I overheated the motor at one point. Well, not the motor, sorry, the battery at one point, because I was going that fast and that hard through the country roads. But even then, I still got 61 miles out of a single charge. That's pretty impressive considering this has got the smallest battery. Now, the 40 miles probably refers to getting on a motorway and sitting there at 70. That will eat through your battery because you're constantly under power, you're going against wind resistance, that just makes it harder, so it's going to eat through the battery really quickly. But if you were around town and stuff like that, you can get up to about 100 miles out of the tank, out of the battery. There is an example that English Electric told me about one of their customers who lives about 10 miles outside London. He rides into London in the morning, he rides around London all day long doing his job, and he only goes about 20 miles an hour most of the time, and then 10 miles back out, and he's getting about 100 miles to a charge on the smaller batteries, I believe. So, although this is quite a small battery, I think it probably hits just good enough for most commutes and most getting around town and stuff like that. Another thing, of course, to mention is the fact that because this is electric, it's very cheap to run. No road tax, it's exempt. Insurance, I believe it's getting more comparable with another bike of the same sort of value. You know, insurance companies are like cool with them these days. But when it comes to charging it up, apparently it can be as little as a penny a mile to run this bike. Even if it was 3 times that, that's still very cheap. And if you use it a lot, every time you do a mile, you're kind of bringing the price of the bike down by the offset saving. Whether you're going to offset a lot of the cost back to the normal cost of something else that wasn't petrol, I don't know. But there's also, of course, the mechanical side to think of. You're not having to fix as many things on an electric bike as you do on a petrol bike. The internal combustion engine is an absolutely wonderful creation, one of the best creations that was ever invented. However, it's got a lot of moving parts and it does break. This bike is pretty much like any other bike in the sense of, like, you know, wheels and brakes and stuff like that, suspension, that's all the same. The frame's similar, although it's a very different style of frame, so they've got to fit different things inside it. It is belt driven on a large pulley, and that's something it does to give you the acceleration for the torque. Beyond that, it's kind of a normal bike, but instead of having the engine, the cooling system, the exhaust and all this stuff, you have a battery and you have a motor. Well, I suppose there is a speed controller in the middle there and a bit of electronics, but that's it. It's got one moving part for the motor rather than, you know, I don't know, hundreds of moving parts. There's no oil changes, there's no coolant changes. As far as maintenance on this bike goes, make sure your tyres are okay, make sure your discs are okay and your pads are okay, you got your brake fluid topped up. Beyond that, there's not really a huge amount to do. There's not the Sunday afternoon, got to go and check the oil or do something like that. You just don't. You just turn it on and go. And there isn't even a warm-up time like with a bike where you sit and warm it up and let the fluids get going. You know, you've got to be kept. This thing, turn it on, go. Before we get going, I've got one more thing to show you, and that is just the controls and the modes. They're pretty simple, but I'm going to do that back home in the garage because you'll be able to see clearer. Okay, so let's show the controls. Completely standard on this side. Pass light, high beam, low beam, and I'll show you those lights now. Do keep in mind this is a camera and not a human eye, so it's not nearly as sensitive as the human eye. But it is, it's pretty bright. So that's on low beam, that's on high beam. Blimey. That's pretty good. That's lighting up the beach all the way over there. It's nice and wide. That's pretty good. Okay, so that switches over to right, okay, yeah. So yep, light's pretty good. Then you got the hazards, indicators, and your horn. Whoa, that's high pitched. And obviously no clutch lever because there is no clutch. On the other side, front brake, and then you've just got the main on-off button and the mode button. And I'll get to that in just a second. So on the screen, which is illuminated in blue, you can see you've got 57% battery remaining, and the time here, speed, this is the odometer, then you've got your estimated range left, and that goes up and down depending on how you're riding at the time. It adjusts itself to let you know. Temperature. And then on this, it's kind of like a rev counter. It goes up and down and it shows you how much of the torque you're using and how much regen you're getting. And then this is the mode. There's 3 modes. Sport mode, which gives you all the power and I think it's just a little bit of regen. You have Eco, which gives you lots of regen and not a lot of power, but it helps you eke out the miles. And then Custom. Now you can adjust this custom setting using an app by connecting your phone to this bike using Bluetooth. I, like many, according to the reviews on the App Store, have had problems getting this bike to actually connect to the app at the moment. There may need to be an update or something, I don't know, but I haven't been able to test that because I can't connect it. For completeness, here is the charging port. Literally is just a kettle lead. And to charge this bike, you just take the key out, as you normally would at night. You can lock it all up, and then you just plug in that cable, and this light starts flashing, and it tells you how long it's going to take to charge up the battery to 100%. Judging the size of this bike might be a bit difficult with me stood next to it because I'm 6'4". If you want to see this side by side with a DRZ 400 SM, then I have a previous video on that and you can see them literally side by side. Size wise, this is a little bit smaller than the DR, a little lower. Not necessarily a bad thing because the DR is a big tall bike and it means that more people, shorter riders, can ride this. So its physical size is maybe like a 250. It's bigger than a 125. It's smaller than my 400. It's somewhere in the middle. And I find it very comfortable to ride. No problems because of the upright seating position. The bars are nice and wide and swept back enough that I'm sat upright. And there is no limiting factor for my knees, which is great. And I should also mention, this has got a pillion seat on it, and for me, that's where the back of my butt sits. So this is a nice little cushion and support for when you accelerate. You know, it's there for the pillion, but actually it's great to keep your butt in place under the acceleration of this bike. Okay, so how do you ride an electric bike? Well, you turn it on. Kick up the side stand, and this red light's still flashing, which means I need to turn this one off, and you use this as your kill switch, your on-off switch, like maybe you would with a standard bike with a key. But on this is essential you do that, because you can't tell when this bike's on or off. Now with that off, nothing happened. With that on, it goes, and you don't know the difference because it doesn't make any noise. Now obviously no clutch, no gearbox, nothing like that. Front brake, rear brake, throttle, it's all one-handed. Now this thing will creep around at about 4 miles an hour if you don't touch any of the brakes. If you just drag the rear brake a little bit, you can bring that down to like 2 miles an hour, you see. Very easy, very controllable, very quick uptake. When you open the throttle on this, you can tell you're not getting like all the power in one sudden go. It ramps up, because if it gave you all of it in one sudden go, I think you're probably going to keep flipping this thing. And it does try and pull the front wheel up if you really get on it. It's about 130 kilos, so it's a pretty light bike for the performance. Compared to a 125, then it might be a little bit more heavy. Although some 125s are way heavier than this. No traction control or anything like that, but it does have ABS front and rear, and although that comes in quite quickly, it does make it very usable. Now, because this is electric, obviously it's very quiet, and you need to be aware of that when you're riding it, especially if you're around pedestrians. They won't hear you coming, and also people think because it's electric you're going to be going very slowly, and the next thing they know is you're on top of them, because this thing accelerates very quickly. In fact, 0 to 60 of this 125cc equivalent is 4 seconds. Now let's compare that to some of the top end 125 petrol bikes, not the Aprilia RS 2-stroke, but you know, like the YZF 125 and all those sorts of things. They're about 13, 14 seconds. 12, 13, 14 seconds, something like that to 60. This is 4. And that's another thing to mention. Because of the weight of this bike being right at the bottom, it doesn't feel like 130 kilos. And it's one of the nicest chassis I've ever ridden. It's absolutely fantastic. The rake, the bars, the tyre choice, the wheel size, the suspension, which is very firm because it's an electric and you need the firm suspension for efficiency, I believe. That would be my guess anyway. But it makes it an absolutely fantastic handling bike. I absolutely, without doubt, would say that compared to any 125, this is the best equivalent I've ever ridden in both performance and chassis. Okay, we're at 55. 70. You see, you don't really expect that from 125. Now, as I mentioned in the modes, because I'm in sport mode, I have very little regen braking, if any. So I need to use the brakes, and they are fantastically good for this bike. They're very safe. The ABS comes in very, it's a little bit early in the front maybe, but for the rear, I do understand why they've done it that way, even though I would like the option to be able to turn that off for off-road use. Pulling away with vigour is a bit different on this, because instead of using the clutch, you know, you hold it on the biting point and then go. The way you need to do it is to just keep the throttle slightly open, you see, so it's kind of holding, and I've got my leg holding it. I guess you probably do this in auto scooters, and then your leg becomes the clutch almost. So straight up to 30, no problem at all. And when you get into traffic, it's very easy to ride, because you're not going up and down gears at all. You're not having to worry about holding the clutch and stuff like that. You ride it like an auto. Now, I haven't been that much of a fan of autos in the past, but with this, it totally makes sense, because it's got so much torque. It just pulls and pulls and pulls to its maximum speed, so it feels like, well, like a toy. Now, because it's got the half-size battery, this doesn't have, you know, the same range as the larger one, so I wouldn't say that this is good for, you know, long daily rides, but as a sort of town weapon, getting around your local area, a short commute, oh my god, you will have fun on this thing. Of course, if you don't want to keep taking the CBT, you actually can just take the A1 licence, although I personally would say take the A2 licence or the full A to give you all the options of bikes. But if you really don't want more than this, the A1 license is there for you, and that will give you, you know, a non-ending CBT, because the CBT runs out after 2 years, and you have to just retake it. It's about 80 to 120 quid. Takes a day. So yeah, you can decide what's going to work out better for you in the long run. And talking about the long run, battery longevity, and, you know, how long will the battery actually last? I know that's another big question people ask about electrics. Well, this one's got a 5-year warranty on the battery. You'll have to look into all the exact details as to what that does and doesn't cover, but the claimed life expectancy is 200,000 miles, and it will still have 80% of its original capacity, which, my God, even if it was only half of that, 100,000 miles to a petrol bike is a lifetime for most bikes. However, with something like this, I can see that maybe even happening, because, you know, wheel bearings, tyres, brake pads, stuff like that, fork oil, fork seals, yeah, that's just normal motorcycle fare. Motor and battery. A replacement battery is very expensive though. I believe they're about $3,000. So, you know, about let's say 2.5, 2.7, something in English. It's expensive, but it's not something you're going to replace that often, so think of it as replacing an engine or having a serious overhaul maybe. And the motor, well, that I don't know. I haven't looked into the price of replacing the motor or how long they actually last for. In theory, they're serviceable, I assume. Hills can be the foe of the 125cc petrol bike. Not this! It doesn't care, apart from it will eat the battery. There's actually something else to mention, the regen braking, which is the equivalent of like engine braking, but it's not. But it gives you a little bit of power back to the battery. Don't see that as if you go up a hill, it's going to give you the same power that you used going up the hill back down the hill. You won't. You'll get a tiny percentage, because what it takes to put you up the hill is hugely more than what it can regen. You see it's quick, and it handles amazingly. This is where I'm going to get into the concern bit. So, I have a DRZ 400 SM. I absolutely love that bike. I've actually just done a restoration to it, a full strip down to bare metal frame and rebuild. If you want to see a video series on that, check out my channel as well. However, it's got a 440cc kit in it, because I had problems with the engine in the past. It's, you know, I've nearly spent as much money on that DRZ as this thing costs over the years. Let's not get into it. And while I was riding this the other day, just knocking out some miles, I was thinking about how I'd been riding it and how I'd enjoyed it and the pros and the cons, and then I did the side-by-side comparison of the DRZ just to kind of, you know, see what they were like side by side, and I came to a horrifying conclusion. If I had this bike with double the battery size, I would prefer it to my DRZ 400 SM. And don't get me wrong, I love petrol engines. I love the sound of that bike. I love the character. I love the feel of that bike. It is amazing. However, this corner's better, brakes better, goes faster, and feels better in the corners, because you can just seem to lean it more because it's got so much weight down there. It's... Forget it's electric. Forget all of that. Just to put a petrol engine in this bike, and I would love to see what this frame is like, because it's that good. When you get below 70% on this bike, between 70 and 100%, you get all the power, everything you want, if it's in the mode to do so. However, when you hit the 70% mark, the software of the bike starts to decrease the power available to you incrementally. So as you get lower and lower and lower, it gives you less and less and less to eke out more and more miles. Now that obviously is something you don't get with a petrol bike, you know, that it slows down to save you fuel. That's something they'll get rid of in the future, I'm sure, when batteries are no longer, you know, range is no longer such a big issue. And I don't think it's going to be a big issue forever. Battery technology is increasing and getting better and better and better. The capacities, the prices, the environmentals even, everything is getting better with them. Whether that's going to be good for the environment overall long run, I don't know enough about it to say, and that's why I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I know it's always brought into electrics whenever you mention them, the environmental side to it. I'm not looking at it from that perspective because the performance of this bike is that good. Now, because I've given this bike such a glowing review, I will point this out. Although I've been lent this bike by English Electric, I have not been asked to say anything, and I would not say anything I don't believe in. I always do honest reviews because that's the important thing to do, and my patrons and my supporters do appreciate that. I want to keep this review shorter than my normal reviews because I think a lot of people, it's a cursory interest, and I think it's those that need to know that electric has moved on a lot. And yeah, sure, it's not cheap enough yet for most, but it's damn good. If you found this video entertaining, useful or interesting, please hit that like button. I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. And if you want to help support this channel, because I'm a full-time YouTuber, this is what I do, consider joining my Patreon for as little as about $1 a month. You get videos up to about a week early. It's a minimum of 3, but it's normally up to about a week at the moment. Part of the Q&A every month, you get your name on screen at the end, everything, all those things, and you help me produce this content. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very lucky because I get people to throw bikes like these at me and say, give it a go and let me know what you think. Thank you for that, English Electric. You have kind of ruined me a little bit because now I really want one. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to see future videos. This channel is made possible by the support of the audience. Please consider joining my patrons to get early access to videos, questions answered in the monthly Q&A, your name on screen, and some exclusive content, all for as little as $1 a month. You can also check out the links in the description to my merch and other ways to directly support the channel. Thanks for watching.